Hello, everyone. TLM Ryan here at Pre-Conciliar Radio. We have breaking news. The SSPX stands their ground. We will get to that in 1 second. I do want to read comments from my last 2 videos that I neglected to do. Anytime you leave a comment, I may read it on my next show. So let's get to one of these. This was a comment from my video where I spoke of Benedict XVI being a great pope. He said, "Hold fast," which is a very apt name for today. It says, "We didn't appreciate how good he was, comparatively speaking, until we got the current crop. Looking back, when Pope, he was totally isolated and working on his own, with the corrupt Vatican and the liberal church and the media all working against him." I agree, and what we're going to talk about today shows us that Benedict's enemies back then are our enemies now, only they have the levers of power. Let's share one more. This was from my latest or my last update on the SSPX when we first got a letter coming back from Rome. This is from Genial OK We Chime 3797. "I knew that the Vatican would use this to revenge themselves against the SSPX for defending Our Lady as co-redemptrix, and when he, Fernandez, and his boss, Leo XIV, denied her that title. But the Lord would not allow his mystical body to be destroyed by human element." Agreed. Remember, what we're going to talk about today is less so about political maneuvering and negotiations and far more about the war of spirits, the war in the spiritual life. So let's go to the letter from the SSPX. If you are late to this saga, the SSPX announced that they are going to consecrate bishops of an unknown number in early July, I believe July 1st, sometime in July. And Rome immediately began talks with them, which had not proven fruitful. I mean, they couldn't even get talks with Rome until they announced this. The representative for the SSPX met with Cardinal Fernandez. Cardinal Fernandez then issued a letter essentially stating that we can talk, but there's minimum requirements, one of which you have to stop your plans to make new bishops, and you have to accept pretty much everything in the Second Vatican Council. So people were speculating how the society would respond. I made a video about that, basically saying that if the society holds and throws the hypocrisy back in Rome's face, they will win this. That's exactly what they've done. I'm going to go through, I'm not going to read the full article or the full letter. This is the letter from the society back to Cardinal Fernandez, but I will go section by section and give a couple summary points for you. I encourage you to read it yourself. But I'm going to go through each section and then give you my analysis on the end of it. So right here in the introduction, the society states that dialogue was always the goal of the SSPX. But then, so they basically reiterate with some pleasantries that they had been trying to do this for 7 years now. Okay. And they say that, dialogue can be useful, but this is where the pleasantries end. The society clearly states that dialogue is way better when there's not threats of excommunication being levied against one side or the other. So they accuse Rome of spoiling talks. Okay, this is factually true, but they are starting to use their own assessment on Rome's actions far more in this letter. This letter is aggressive. Okay, this is what happens when you have between any negotiating party, things start to ramp up. And it depends really on what the goal is. Now, the society may have secret goals that they're not, again, this is public. So they may have, private goals that this letter is intended to leverage that nobody knows about except those in the society. Same with Rome. So, we can take it at its face value, but there may be hidden angles here as well. That's what occurs in any negotiation. It's smart to not play all your cards on the table, but you also have to show strength. Do I think this is a bluff? Well, not really, and we'll see why when we get into the points. This gets pretty harsh. But immediately they accuse Rome of basically spoiling talks by threatening people with excommunication. And then they immediately say, we will not be able to have this dialogue under the conditions you just outlined, which was what my previous video was about. Okay, then he says, I'd like to respectfully present to you the reasons why this isn't going to work. But they do state, they get the elephant, they point out the elephant in the room right away, which is what's going to happen on July 1st. And they say, we're not going to postpone it. Because that was the condition that Fernandez, everybody was claiming that Fernandez and Rome had this masterstroke, and they had backed the SSPX into a corner because they said, we're not going to talk to you unless you indefinitely postpone the consecration of bishops. So right out the gate, the society says, yeah, we're not going to do that. I said in my last video that the SSPX wins this if they have courage, they stand their ground, and they show that Rome is full of hypocrites. This is what they do. So first, they stand their ground. We're going to keep going on July 1st. No ifs, ands, or buts. But out of respect, they're going to give Cardinal Fernandez a few reasons why. Okay. This is where it gets, they get right to the heart of it. In section 1 or reason 1 and section 2 or reason 2, they flatly state this is about the Second Vatican Council, and they state that the church ruptured at that council. Okay, this is not Benedict hermeneutic of continuity. This is not, hey, we can read the texts as they are, and if we just interpret it the right way through the light of tradition, the council's okay. No, they state that there are problems with the council. They state that the council needs to be amended, but Rome has already stated it can't be amended. So if that's the case, they can't. If that's the case, then the church ruptured at the Second Vatican Council. Now, you may think that's harsh, but that's precisely what the people in Rome say. Many of the modernist cardinals and bishops and those who hold power in Rome say it's a new religion from their own mouth. So this is not some type of scathing accusation from the SSPX. And what you'll see in the rest of this letter is they use Rome's own language against them. Brilliant. They're subtly calling them hypocrites. Okay, let's look. What do we have for section 3? They basically give a little history of the communication timeline, or the attempt to even begin talks. And they accuse Rome of ignoring the society for 7 years. And then the only reason they'll talk to them is because the society finally decided to make some new bishops. And then does that force Rome to the table? Yes, but Rome doesn't even come to the table in a peaceful manner. They come already with accusations of schism, still learning that word, schism, and excommunication. The society also just flatly states we're not in schism, and we won't be. They really don't go into that. There's tons of theological reasons that they have, and they've had in the past in 1988 as to why that's not the case. This is a very pointed and quite honestly direct smackdown of Rome's position. They just say, yeah, that's not true. Okay, section 4. Section 4 basically states you can't solve everything with dialogue. That's all Rome is offering. And they state, look, to be Catholic and what it means to be Catholic has nothing to do with dialogue. You can't dialogue your way into discerning whether or not you're Catholic. That's not how we do it. The minimum requirements to be Catholic have nothing to do with dialogue, and the Church, through its tradition and through its magisterium, has clear minimum requirements for what it means to be Catholic. So they are rejecting modernist Rome's opinion on what the minimum requirements are. They say, that's a novelty. We have 2,000 years of precedent. To use a legal term. But 2,000 years of church teaching to show what it means to be Catholic. We are not accepting your definition of what it means to be Catholic. I like Section 4 the most because the SSPX isn't letting Rome dictate the rules anymore. They are not going to simply obey for obedience's sake. Okay? You have the right to disobey when the purported obedience would violate the faith and God's law. And they're simply saying, you are making this up. We're not playing by your rules. This is a very masculine stance. You're going to see the differences, I think, as this comes back and forth between masculine society and tradition and the effeminate in Rome. I don't know who thought that Rome had a genius move with Cardinal Fernandez in the last letter. It wasn't genius. It wasn't. I would not have counseled Rome to write it that way. You have one meeting and then you come down with a threat of excommunication. Even when I have awful opposing counsel, I never get that aggressive right away. That's a sign of... In fact, when I have awful and irritable opposing counsel, it's typically because they don't have the facts on their side. It's a really good telltale sign. I would not have counseled Rome to do that. I don't know why anybody thought it was genius. And the SSPX is responding precisely how I said in my last video they should respond. Okay, section 5 basically says speaking to you is pointless. I'm going to read this because I think it's good. Finally, if dialogue is envisioned with aim of producing a doctrinal statement that the society should accept regarding the Second Vatican Council, we cannot ignore the historical precedent of efforts made in this direction. I draw your attention to the most recent. The Holy See and the Society had a long course of dialogue beginning in 2009, particularly intense for 2 years, then pursued more sporadically until the 6th of June, 2017. Throughout these years, we sought to achieve what the dicastery now proposes. Yet everything ultimately ended in drastic manner with the unilateral decision of Cardinal Mueller, the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, who in June of 2017 solemnly established in his own way, quote unquote, the minimum requirements for full communion with the Catholic Church, unquote, explicitly including the entire council and the post-conciliar period. This shows that if one persists in a doctrinal dialogue that is too forced and lacks sufficient serenity in the long term, instead of achieving a satisfactory result, one only worsens the situation. Talking to you is pointless. You bloviate and you waste our time and you extend things, no matter how intense or how sporadic it gets, and things just get worse. Rome, from its post-council, all of their ecumenical dialogue, if you think about this as a negotiation, let's take it between Rome and the Protestants. It has always been Rome leaning towards the Protestants. Now, when you're in a negotiation, and by the way, I'm not claiming that you should negotiate on the faith. This is the way negotiations work effectively. If you lean towards one side, let's say you're negotiating a contract and you say, okay, we'll strike this section that you want struck, but I want this in exchange. I want to put these words in as a counteroffer. You go back and forth, right? You lob the ball back and forth until you get closer to the middle. Rome they're the worst at deals. They're absolutely awful. They bend 100% towards the Protestants, Muslims, anybody who's not Catholic. And they never ask any of the Protestant groups to, I don't know, could we maybe rethink sola fide or sola scriptura? No, not once. But then here, they are the ones who won't move at all. So the society is saying, we need you to come towards us a little bit on this council. You need to start, can we please tweak some of this? I don't know if that's what they've specifically asked, but clearly these are the issues, is something with the council. But Rome remains rigid. The only time they do. That's why people are like, I don't think they're going to excommunicate them. They will. This is the golden calf of the modernists. It's the council. Because they bend on everything else. Why can't they bend on this? Pay attention to what people do, not what they say. And the modernists have always been rigid on the council and nothing else. That tells you all you need to know. Okay? So these negotiations aren't going to go anywhere. The SSPX has been at it for years. So they know the drill. But they're flatly stating that you guys never bend towards us at all. You have your line in the sand and you don't cross it, which is great when you're on the side of tradition. It's not so great when you're coming up with quote unquote minimum requirements for full communion with the church that are totally novel. Okay, so then this is worth, things escalate. So if you want to see this is like a inverted pyramid. Things start delicately and then they just broaden out and the full broadside comes at Rome here. So then the society says, look, we exist. We're an objective reality and we're not going anywhere. And they say there's evidence that Rome recognizes our existence because they've had to take note of us. They've had to take significant and concrete actions towards us, both positive and negative, I suppose. So they say, we're not going anywhere. Like it or not, you're not getting rid of us. And they say, you don't need to do anything. We're in a good status right now. We're not in schism. All you need to do is let us be us. Let us continue doing what we do for the salvation of souls. They mention salvation of souls twice. And they basically say, we're going to continue. And, we don't really ever see in the near future a resolution to this because there are doctrinal divergences. That's a hefty accusation. It's true, but... and then they explain why July 1st will remain the date at this point. It has nothing to do with talking to the modernists in Rome anymore. It's a period of reflection, preparation, and prayer. The SSPX have they've drawn their line in the sand. We are here. We're not going anywhere. If your conditions for further dialogue is that we accept the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council as it is, that's a non-starter. We're not pulling back on creating new bishops. They did exactly what I said they needed to do. I said that if they wanted to really control the narrative in these rounds of negotiations, they needed to show courage and they needed to flip the script back onto Rome. Everybody thought that Rome had a great response. All they needed to do, I said it in my last video, all they needed to do was restate what they had stated. And if they wanted to, quote, I said, play dirty, quote unquote, they could show the hypocrisy of Rome. They did all of that. They restated everything. They didn't budge on anything. They gave nothing to Fernandez. They restated what they were going to do. They offered a little more clarity of why they would do it. They showed why further negotiations just were useless based on precedent, signaling to Rome, you need to change your strategy, or we're just going to go ahead with this anyways. And then they mentioned twice that this is about the salvation of souls, and that they're not going to stop saving souls. Sorry, not sorry, is what they said to Rome. I love it. That's strength. And it's not the sedevacantist argument of we're going to just completely ignore your existence. It's no, we're going to stay here and harass you till kingdom come. And now what? Rome's in a position of continued decline, and the SSPX is only growing. I mean, trust me, the only thing the SSPX parishioners were fearful of was the SSPX buckling. They did not buckle. Look, if you're in a bad position right now and you're worried about your diocesan Latin Mass, you've got a safe haven with with the society. Okay? I love to see it. It's exactly what I told them they should do. Not personally, just on this channel. Nobody's listening to me at the society. This was exactly what I hypothesized would put them in the driver's seat again. Everybody thought they weren't in the driver's seat after the last letter from Fernandez. They are fully in the driver's seat. And they're prepared. They'll get excommunicated. They've been there, done that. And then how do you justify it? The excommunications were lifted. So were they even valid? Anyways, I really liked it, and I particularly enjoyed how they called out the hypocrisy, and they flatly stated there was a rupture. And they didn't just say it was a rupture based on reading the documents. They stated it was a rupture based on how the magisterium has continually interpreted that council. So the battle lines are drawn. Okay, things are clear now. Anyways, that's my update. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, Godspeed.